Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today entitled Unlock the Power of a Multi-Generational Workforce. My name is Aldous Krachunas, and I'm joined by my colleague Keith Groya, and more importantly, by our presenter today, Dr. Eileen Wilson, who has been at Michigan State for a number of years and also teaches in our executive development programs. We've picked this topic because of the two topics that really are going to impact organizations in the future, AI and managing across generations. This is one that in particular, people can start using the ideas immediately. And so it really is critical, and we're glad that you're able to join this first of many continuing education webinars. So why is this topic so important? As we see on the next slide, what we're seeing now more than ever before is the range of generations in the workforce. People are staying in the workforce longer, they're living longer. And so while we've had generations in the workforce forever, probably, it's even more emphasized than it used to be. Also, as technology and other things are changing in the world, we're seeing more maybe distinctions across the generations. And so in a way, it's crept up on us, I think, the intensity of what we're experiencing. And I think COVID, as it did for many things, has heightened that intensity. Current data shows that 200,000 to 300,000 people in the US alone are retiring monthly. So we're losing some of that knowledge from the workforce. And if we don't learn how to work across generations more effectively, that knowledge will be leaving those organizations. So that brings us to the current impact on what we're looking at is how the generational silos, if they stay siloed, we're missing the opportunity to bring the best of all generations together. And even right now, on a daily basis, we're seeing the impact. You pick up any news source, whatever you prefer, be it a podcast, be it a paper, they're talking about generations, the differences. And most of it focuses on the negatives of the different generations. Today, what I'm really happy with how Eileen approaches it is it brings out the positives of what each generation can do and a bit of a change of mental approach to that. So for the rest of today, Eileen will be giving us some, as I call it, level setting and definitions on generations, 4 differences of many across generations, 2 core issues that relate to the work environment of how one can address those, and then taking you through a interactive process to create a personal plan to address those different generational differences. As we move forward, I ask everyone to keep their mic muted, and thank you for that. And also, please use the chat feature within the webinar. I'll be monitoring that and then asking Eileen questions along the way. More of a talk show approach is what I would like to call it. So again, thank you everyone for joining today. I really hope you enjoy this webinar, and I hand it over to Eileen. So welcome, Eileen, and thank you.
Thank you, Aldous and Keith. Just to add on to this slide, by 2030, 30% of the workforce will be Gen Z. And I actually did conduct this research to better understand and lead multi-generational teams in the college. The strategies that I share today made me a more effective and impactful leader. Sorry, too many hits. So the idea that we're considering today is that knowing, valuing, and leveraging generational differences promotes greater productivity, morale, and organizational success. So let's look at the 6 generations that are walking on Earth. From a workplace perspective, silent generation represents 1% of the workforce, baby boomers 15%, Gen X 31%, millennials 35%, Gen Z 18%, And Gen Alpha, well, they're just kids. So let's let them grow up a little bit before they join us in the workforce. So let's take a poll. It would be really interesting to see the composition of our group today. If you could just choose based on your birth year, what generation that you fit into. Okay.
Poll is open. I see a bunch of people answering. Never quite sure what you can see on your end, but I will publish the results here momentarily. And again, hopefully you can see those results. If not, I'll verbalize them. And
We
again,
need to do, we have to get more Gen Z in next time, it looks like.
Right. Well,
Right.
they're still young. They're young employees.
So just 10 more seconds to click on your option or which generation you are, and I will publish the results. And here we go. Again, not quite sure what you can see, but it looks like we've got 3% on the call from the silent generation, 10% are baby boomers, Gen X making up the bulk of the crew, 64%, millennials, 23%, and believe it or not, Gen Z, 0%.
Okay, so I did expect the largest portion to be Gen X and millennials. It's nice to see some other generations represented. And again, we're going to see Gen Z increase in time here in the workplace. I'm trying to advance the slide here. I think Aldous is coming to help me. So I had the slide on here. Okay. Thank you, Aldous. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, so what is a generation? A generation is an identifiable age group that shares a historical experience, roughly in the first 20 to 23 years of life. So they develop unique core values and attitudes different from other generations. So think about things like parental guidance, interactions with peers, media, popular culture, economic, and political events that actually shape a generation's culture. So let's learn about the culture of each generation represented in the workplace. And so we're going to look at the green items, historical experience, and specific culture that that generation brings to society. In the full multi-generational session, we actually look at the other generational aspects listed on the slide. Baby boomers experienced the Vietnam War, the Cold War, social unrest, President Kennedy's assassination, the moon landing, civil rights, women's lib, and Woodstock during their formative years. They also established mobility and employment and travel, and they are very competitive with each other because of the size of their generation. Baby boomers are known as a drug, sex, and rock and roll generation. They love to push limits and be trendsetters, including the counterculture and youth culture movement. Their generation is idealistic and value equality. And they had a distrust as young people in authority, so they questioned establishment. They're known to seek self-gratification and to be self-absorbed. Boomers developed the live to work or workaholic concept. Gen X grew up during a particularly tumultuous time in world history. They experienced the Gulf War, national debt, the Challenger, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the Reagan-Thatcherism era. They witnessed their parents having an insecure financial future, including job loss and sometimes house foreclosure. There were also significant changes in the family structure during Gen Xers' formative years. So non-traditional, divorced, single-parent families became more the norm in American society. Many Gen Xers were raised by childcare other than their parents, and they became the latchkey kids. The culture of Gen X has been described by researchers as cynical, but based on what Gen X witnessed in their families and across the globe, can we blame them? I say no. This has made Gen X less trusting as a generation. Their culture includes not adhering to boundaries, but seeing possibilities, not limitations. They love fast-paced everything, and their culture established the broad use of IT. As individuals, they are self-reliant and independent. During their formative years, millennials witnessed national gun violence, weapons and metal detectors in schools, 9/11, the Second Gulf War, and global military conflicts. They also experienced the Great Recession of 2008. They grew up with reality TV, video games, the World Wide Web, Google, and social media. Millennials are very goal-oriented and have been highly supervised, grew up quickly, and most are BFFs with their parents. They love this kind of screen time, and because millennials grew up with the World Wide Web and Google, they consider accumulated knowledge as unnecessary. As a generation, they are known to be very confident. Whoops, sorry. Gen Z, their formative years, they witnessed global financial and political turmoil, climate change, the energy crisis, and WikiLeaks. For perspective, Gen Z, they don't remember 9/11, but they're very familiar with cloud computing. Gen Zs are known to be humanitarians and are very community-minded. They are hardworking, ambitious, practical, and financially prudent. Gen Zers are perceived as more mature and independent than their older millennial siblings, and they appreciate an education. Because Gen Z are known to be kind, they avoid online bullying by turning to anonymous social media for privacy, such as Whisper, Yik Yak, and Secret. So let's pause a minute. Are there any questions about a generation's formative years, that historical experience, or that specific culture that they bring to society?
So I've gotten two questions, Eileen. So the
Okay,
first
great.
one, they asked, based on what you've shared, the generation I adhere to is different than my birth year. Can you comment on that?
Yes, that's really important. Thank you for bringing this forward. So, what we realize is that some people in our lives have a huge impact, a huge influence on our lives. So, think about teachers, community leaders. It could be someone like a senior person in our family that just had a huge impact on us. And so, it imprints actually on us during our formative years. And so we actually adopt, we take that in so deeply that we adopt some of those values and attitudes of that generation.
Okay, and then the second, thank you, Professor. I'm listening to this from outside North America. How much of this is applicable to other countries around the world?
Yeah, excellent question there. So when we offer this program, this session for multinational corporations, I do include things about national culture and regional differences across the globe. But I think we also have to look at what's common, right? So some of those global events that occur that affect all of us, regardless of nationality or national culture. And then I think some of the aspects, we heard about technology in these, and technology has had what should we say, a significant impact on all of us across the globe. So, well, I think there's some nuances based on national culture. I think quite a bit of this is applicable. Yes, thank you.
And just from what I'm seeing, usually seems to be technology, military conflict, and economic fluctuations often create sort of a endpoint for a generation. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, in the larger session, we look for things that are in common across the generations, and so you're absolutely right. It's military conflict, unfortunately, some kind of financial crisis or instability that occurs. Sometimes there's something environmental, right, that actually has an impact across the globe. So yes, absolutely. Those are great points. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so let's have a second poll. What I'd like you to do in this list is to pick the one that has been the most challenging for you in the workplace with your multi-generational team.
Poll is launched. I see people filling it out. We'll give you another 15, 20 seconds to identify your challenge. Just a handful of people still need to respond, and we'll publish the results.
Yes,
All right.
thank you for participating. This is fascinating for me as a researcher. You're giving me very contemporary, real-time data here. This is great.
And again, in the interest of making sure everybody knows the results, if you cannot see them, it looks like 30% of you responded with work style or work ethic, 35% communication style, 13% business etiquette, and then 20% mobile device use, and then 3% of you, which I believe is probably one or two of you, hit other.
Yeah, so I actually expected that work style and communication would be the big hitters. I think that though when I look at these, there's an interrelationship, right? So I think what happens is work style, we kind of trip on that often, all the time. It's a daily thing, and true with communication. But then business etiquette or device use, it might be more in a meeting setting, something particular about that. So these are great results. I really appreciate you sharing your experience. Okay, Aldous, I'm having a hard time again moving the slides. I apologize for this. So you could probably tell how many times I've done a webinar. Got the pointer on the slide. Thank you. I just don't have the touch. That's what it is. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so now let's actually look at the 4 generations as employees based on their generational culture. So this includes workplace preferences, attributes, and motivators. And note that these are the building blocks of talent retention. The thing is, and you'll notice in the red, there are differences between generations of employees. The important thing, a great perspective is to actually think about neither are better or worse. It's just different. So Gen X is different than me. It doesn't mean I'm right. They're better, they're worse. In the full session, we actually cover all the topics listed, but today we're going to focus on the green items and then some of the work motivators. For baby boomers, work ethic is the sum total of a strong work ethic plus intelligence plus education. Boomers do respect rank and status, but will challenge established systems. As employees, boomers expect equal treatment and equal opportunity for everyone at work, but they do not need day-to-day supervision. What motivates boomers at work? Since the baby boomer generation was so large and competitive, it's fostered a desire in them for recognition, reward, praise, money, and promotion. They are considered materialistic and like advancement in titles and income. Since baby boomer employees place great value on the importance of their work, they want their contributions to matter to the organization. Work ethic is measured by productivity, meaning results over quantity for Gen Xers, and they strive for balance within their work lives. Gen Xers respect knowledge, not titles, and they will be loyal to a manager that they respect. Gen Xers don't want a boss, they only want supervision for professional development. What motivates Gen X at work? Well, they learn from their parents' careers and families' experience that being loyal is not rewarded. So Gen Xers are motivated by professional development opportunities, and the more portable, the better. Because Gen Xers want balance in their lives, they look for efficiencies in the workplace. Think about cutting edge IT equipment. And this is also they can return to their families. Gen Xers prefer an informal work environment that includes flexibility in work assignments, hours, and responsibilities. The more independence and autonomy, the better for Gen Xers. Millennials' work ethic includes defining work as important, but not more important than other aspects of life. Millennial employees focus on results, not time spent at work. Millennials desire strong leadership and access to it, and they actually want supervisors to be coaches, friends, role models, and to a degree, parents. They also want a lot of feedback. They do respect strong leadership and appreciate those who share knowledge. What motivates a millennial employee? The best IT, training and development, higher levels of responsibility with variety. And because millennials were over supervised as children and grew up with the "you are special" label, they are motivated by personal attention. As employees, Gen Z are very hardworking and self-reliant, but they will look for easy ways to do things. They do not require a ton of supervision for day-to-day tasks involving IT, but they are less sure themselves with soft skills. Gen Z workers are respectful of authority and hierarchical structures, and they want to be successful within the system. So they work very hard to not need supervision. They do, however, expect access to superiors and on a very regular basis, sometimes daily. I've learned from my teaching assistants that they actually want what they call check-ins. So I see them twice a week, but what they really want is face-to-face human contact, kind of one-on-one. What motivates Gen Z at work? In addition to living a life of meaningfulness. Gen Z employees are practical, so money and benefits motivate them, and they are willing to do whatever it takes to achieve job and financial security. The flip side of this, however, is that Gen Z has very high expectations of their superiors and leaders. So let's take a pause and see if there's any questions about workplace attributes, preferences, or motivators.
The one that I have, Eileen, as we're waiting for questions to come in, from your research and experience, are there two generations across the four that seem to connect more easily?
Yes, well, what's interesting, the nickname of Gen Z is actually boomlet because they have a lot of the baby boomer values and attitudes. So when you heard that they're hardworking, they'll do whatever it takes, that sounds very boomer to me. And so I think, they've picked up on things from Gen X and millennials that they want different, not wrong, right? Not bad. They just want it different. So sometimes, we see some things come full circle, right? Let's hope they don't turn into workaholics the way boomers are. Good.
Okay. And then one question that came in, you might be covering this later, but how can I motivate different generations when they're on the same team?
Right. So we're going to talk in a minute about a couple of contentious issues that we find within our multi-generational teams, and then, sort of how to adapt, adjust, how to retain that talent. And I think one of the big challenges is actually helping others develop appreciation for generational diversity and start learning about some of these differences, right? And to focus on more of the positive attributes. None of us are strong at everything. All of us have areas of improvement. And we bring our formative years with us, right? So that's a great question, and hopefully we'll get to that. And we'll pause and ask the question. That was great.
And one more that just came in.
Yeah, great.
Regarding Gen Z, I totally can see the motivators, but the work ethic piece, in parentheses, I am not saying I disagree, but I do hear many people say the opposite. What do you think?
I do really appreciate that, and I have struggled with that with Gen Z. I think part of it is the mobile device. In the big session, we talk about it's like an appendage, right? And actually, I go through technology with each generation, and for Gen Z, they're labeled technoholics. They've actually created an addiction, correct, to that small handheld device. And so, my superiors taught me things that maybe my generation we weren't great at. And now it's my turn where I need to teach Gen Z things that, you know, my generation had learned because we didn't live with devices in our cribs growing up. And so things like soft skills, a time and a place for using devices is very important. And I will share, and I mean this with all humor, I have shared with my undergraduate students, I ask them to put their devices away for an hour and 20 minutes of class. And I say to them, you have a relationship with your phone already, and a pretty intimate one, I must say. And so, let's get to know each other. And actually, Gen Z starve for human connection. And that is the signal that I hear when they talk to me about check-ins. It's like they're reaching out and they know that they need to develop the skill. They're uncomfortable with it. So I really tried to build on that and make that a regular thing where they don't have to ask for it. But I really appreciate their kind of emotional honesty, their developmental honesty that they need to develop soft skills. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go to the next poll, and I just want to mention to Keith, it seems like after we do the poll, I'm a slow learner here, but after we do a poll, I have a hard time going to the next screen. So if we can just anticipate that. Okay, so what I'd like you to do from this list is pick the workplace. Now we're talking about the workplace, not generation, but what the work environment can provide, right? So what workplace attribute do you believe is the most important across all the generations? Which one of these four do you think is most important to everyone in the workplace?
Poll is open. I see we've got at least 25 responses already and climbing. We'll give you another 10 seconds to respond. And again, I'll verbalize the results in case you don't see them.
Thank you, Keith.
Of course. Just another 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Okay, I'm sharing the results. Hopefully you can see them, but let me verbalize them. Being heard came in at 8%. Recognition, 10%. Respect was the clear leader with 55%, and then trust at 28%.
That's excellent. Well, this is really very spot on, I have to tell you, because regardless of differences, an Achieve Global survey revealed that the number one workplace attribute among all generations across the globe is respect. And then, of course, the other key attributes are the other three. I think that, trust is very high. I think, maybe respect and trust go hand in hand, but that was excellent. Okay, awesome. So, of course, conflict organically occurs between, in the workplace because differences do exist within generations. So let's look at two out of the list, two of the conflict creators. Again, the full list is what we cover in the regular multi-generational session. So the first one, common. It was very high communication and work style. Remember that from one of our polls. Very common issue in the workplace. And so the other way to think about it, work ethic is a little off-putting, but it is what they talk about in research. But I also think about work habit. Okay, work habit. So boomers work long days and weekends if need be, and of course they do, right? Because they're workaholics. Gen X works smart and efficiently to get the job done, and they do not see the need to put in long hours. Millennials look for ways to get the work done because they also want to enjoy the rest of their lives. And Gen Z love everything flexible, anything flexible, hours, remote work, you name it. Another comparison, another way to look at it. Boomers and Gen X, defined as the older workers in the workplace today, like to take on a project and work independently. Younger workers, millennials and Gen Z, prefer group work and they like to have feedback, daily feedback on projects. So when I approach work style with employees, I actually think about work-life blending. Work-life blending. This is a paradigm shift from work-life balance. So work-life blending is a blurring of professional and personal activities during time in both venues. And it really happened since personal computers entered the home and really has been a 24/7 proposition since the advent of smartphones. And we see this behavior, it was mentioned earlier, in younger employees. They may want to send a personal text during work, and baby boomers may not find it an appropriate use of time at work. But actually, all of us more seasoned professionals actually do it too, right? So maybe think about the times you've sent a personal email or a personal text at the end of the day, right? Maybe it was after regular work hours, which is awesome, but we're also using employer resources like utilities. So we need to consider if there's an expectation of employees for handling work after normal work hours, then the employer needs to provide some flexibility at work as appropriate. So remember blending, work-life blending. The other big contentious issue, as the poll showed, was communication. Well, why? Well, boomers use formal two-way communication. Gen X uses two-way communication in an informal, flexible style. Millennials and Gen Z use informal communication, not face-to-face, and offer unsolicited comments. Does this sound familiar? So besides generational style differences, we then have sort of basic human communication elements that can inhibit our ability to communicate. And this is especially true if we include listening as an important part of effective communication. I always teach young professionals to listen to what's not being said, because the words that aren't spoken are still probably very meaningful messages. But listening to what's not being said takes a lot of listening, or should I say it takes a lot of not talking, right? To hear what's not being said. And then there's the essential kind of aspects of communication. Those are content and process. Content and process. So content's the actual topics, items that we bring up in a particular conversation, and the actual words that we choose. Process, the second aspect, is how we say those words. The tone, the messaging, the deliberate approach of communicating. And process is as important as content, because if people aren't listening because of tone, then the message isn't heard, and then the the communication goal is completely failed. So I like to think of communication as a vehicle for fostering relationships. And I try to treat work relationships like any relationship. Invest in it, communicate to increase understanding, and to maintain a positive relationship. I always share with new supervisors. People cannot understand what they don't know, and they cannot support what they don't understand. Looking at organizational culture from an employee perspective, we know that professionals are more productive, satisfied, and loyal if their values are consistent with organizational culture. Adapting to generational differences to fully leverage talent and potential elevates and actualizes the capability of each employee and our organizations. Do we have any questions about work-life blending, communication, and promoting organizational culture by adapting?
I have one actually, as we
Okay,
wait for
great.
any others to come in.
Great.
So I do wonder if that work-life blending is truly a new concept, only because I think for many years there's been blending. I remember, before people had printers at home, they would
Yeah.
copy stuff at work. Or the whole idea of Cyber Monday was that before everyone had laptops at home, they would do shopping on the Monday after the Thanksgiving weekend here in the US. So I think we've been seeing it. Maybe we're just recognizing it more, or maybe because we're more online connected, it's easier to do it. Do you have any thoughts on that observation?
Yeah, I think, we all have felt what technology and the internet has done in our work lives and in our personal lives. I think what's happened is, excuse me, as devices change, right? So we go from computer to a transportable computer, which is a laptop, to a tablet, to now handheld devices. It's really expanded, right? The depth and really our addiction. We're all addicted to it, right? I sleep with my hand held, for Pete's sake. So I think what's happened is it's created more of that 24/7
Okay.
ability. And so the work-life blending I think we have been doing it, and it's been creeping up and advancing, but I think it's something I think is more full-blown, and I think it's a more healthy way to think about work-life balance. I always felt like I was losing. I was never successful with work-life balance, especially once handheld devices came into being, right? But now when I think about work-life blending, I feel like I can exhale. I don't resent having to do work. Well, I'm a boomer, so I work all the time, but I don't resent having to work for 3 minutes when I maybe have company, because I also do, say cyber shopping was your point, all this, there's things that we do at work that aren't work related. It just helps reframe. It's a different kind of mindset.
Okay. And then one more question came in. How can we design culture in ways that resonate across generations, especially when the meaning of culture may differ, so that each generation connects with it meaningfully?
Yeah, I think, we have a responsibility to educate our teams on generational differences and really try to shift the focus from the negative. And in the big session, we talk about some bias. There's 18 kinds of unconscious bias, for example. We don't talk about all 18, but the point is to help people begin to shift, you know, really their thinking, and then their treatment and their attitude towards each other, and really to help build. And we're starting on the strategy piece. We're gonna get to, there's some really meaningful and effective ways to start helping our teams interact in a way where they start to appreciate each other's generational differences, and actually learn from each other. Yeah, great
Thank you.
question.
One more question. How do you think workplace culture has evolved with each generation entering the workforce?
So I would say it was more formal because, if you think about it, when it was only silent generation, baby boomers and Gen X, we were following the silent generation. It was a, much more kind of suit, tie, blouse kind of situation, right? And, it was more strict work hours, if you will. And even jobs, I think, there were more defined roles and positions. And again, I think, IT has really changed the whole concept of work. And then as we shift to younger generations, I'm going to pick on myself. It's become, I call it cash. It's just more casual now. And so I have learned from other generations, frankly, that, for example, because I picked on attire, clothes don't get the work done. And boomers dress for success and for rank and for that next position. And what I learned, and I'm so grateful for, from Gen X and millennials, is that what I wear doesn't get the work done. And maybe if I'm actually more comfortable, I get the work done maybe more efficiently. Maybe I'm more effective. Maybe I'm happier. I don't know. But so, and I'm going to talk in a minute about a strategy about actually adopting other generations' attributes that, frankly, are better than, your own generation. And it's really enriched my professional life and my personal life, to be honest. Yeah, great question.
I'm going to ask one more question because it's we've talked about this topic a lot.
Yeah.
I think a challenge that everyone on this webinar has is, what do you do when you think people are not properly appreciating a different generation, or they're even showing ageism towards a different generation? I know you've dealt with that, and that's the difficult one, right? We all want to get along, and that's nothing new, but if you could give, and I know you've dealt with it, so can you give an example when you feel someone has incorrectly evaluated a different generation? What did you do in that instance?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So, a couple of thoughts first. I really believe in teachable moments. I think that teachable moments work horizontally and vertically in an organization. I think it's important that we help each other grow and learn. And sometimes that then means really difficult conversations. And so what I've tried to do is learn how to deliver a difficult message, and it has to be firm, it has to be clear, but as empathetically and supportively as possible. And so I kind of employ a kind of tough love approach, if you will. But here's an example. So I actually confronted some neighbors because they were using the term TikTok teenager, and it really bothered me. That's and I think we do things unintentionally and we do things unconsciously, but it's still bias. And so I just talked with them about it. That we're here to teach our kids and to elevate and to shape a community, right? And to advance good. And bias doesn't do any good for anyone in any way. And then another conversation I had actually was somebody using the term "okay, boomer." And I know it's very funny. It was on TikTok, and it was very funny on TikTok. But when it starts to become part of our kind of colloquial jargon, then we're expressing bias. And frankly, saying "okay, boomer" is no different than a racial slur. It's an ageist slur. So I had this conversation with a Gen Zer, but it was more that, with a check-in kind of a approach. It was face-to-face. It was private, right? I didn't want to embarrass. And then I shared. But then I also shared the story about how I defend Gen Zers and
Right.
alphas, right? And so, again, sometimes teachable moments, hard conversations, but providing that empathy and support. This is the other thing. We're not made to be perfect. We're made to be whole. And to be whole means that we have to grow. And I've had some really great lessons through hard conversations that people have had with me.
Excellent. And I think what you bring out is that the labels become dismissive of another generation. And I like what you've shared and how to deal with that. One more question.
Sure.
I know, well, we're doing fine on time.
Okay.
It's a good one because I think it does apply to many of the older generations. I observe boomer bosses struggling to see millennials for senior supervisory roles because boomers cannot get past the visual of someone the same age as their kids being in charge or giving work direction. Any suggestions for the boomers having a hard time making the mindset change?
Well, the first thing is, what do we want for our kids? Do we want our kids halted in their careers, and there's hurdles and impediments and barriers? No. And if we're doing our jobs, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but if we're doing our jobs as leaders, setting people up for success, developing them, utilizing their talent, helping them develop their potential that often people can't see their potential. I think that's really important, and it can be, and I've had to do it, I will say, step aside. But what's really great is that there's always a place for everyone. And so maybe boomers need to think about, hey, there's millennials that are ready. We've invested in them. It's time. And maybe it's an issue of trust more than respect. And then there's that pride of, I got to be able to let go and I have to be supportive and continue my mentorship. But, we need to give people the opportunity. You're not going to be there forever. I don't think. If you want to work till 83 or 105, and we want diversity of talent. I always hire a team that's different than me. Is it harder to manage and lead? Yes, right? Because they don't just follow. But the conversations, the product development, and the actual result is so much richer because it wasn't all people like Eileen. So it's the same thing with, actually advancing millennials that we've been developing for a number of years.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so more strategies. This is the good stuff, as Aldous calls it. What I'd like you to do is just on your own, just on your tablet, on your phone, just jot down a person or a generation that you would like to connect or relate to better. Okay, so we're going to move along here. All right, now the second step is we're going to choose an approach. And let me go through these strategies. The hope is that you can actually implement them now. The first is generational diversity. And this is basically knowing and then valuing generational differences in the workplace. And by doing this positively, actively, right? Appreciating, supporting, and leveraging those generational differences. Another very effective strategy that's worked very well for me is to adapt to a generation's attitudes or preferences. So no matter what your role is in the organization, no matter what your age, meaning no matter what your generation is, to actually adapt to generational differences and to individual differences where we can. We can't always, but when we can, adapt. And then generational adoption. This is one of my personal favorites. It takes a while to kind of get in the groove. But this is when an older worker of one generation adopts something from a worker of a different generation. And technology is a great example, right? So a younger worker maybe wants to learn documenting skills from a more experienced older worker. Or another example would be an older worker wants to learn more uses of cloud computing. And then mutual mentoring, extremely useful and effective in a team environment. This is when there's mentoring provided by and for each person in the relationship. So the more seasoned professional and then the new professional or younger professional learn skills from each other. So, for example, a younger professional wants to develop, say, a soft skill, like maybe interpersonal communication. And then the seasoned professional wants to learn maybe workarounds with some new software that was just rolled out. And then step 3, we all work at such a chaotic pace now. I really want you to do a pause to self-reflect and consider leveraging your sophisticated professional style. Think big picture, right, with the organizational goal matrix in mind, and actually teach this level of thinking to your team members. And the other thing I try to do is to remember, because we all have hard, challenging days, but everybody has something to contribute. So demonstrating on a very consistent basis that respect and then communicate that appreciation, acknowledgement to both young and veteran workers. And then again, flexibility. As leaders, we need to honor and to adapt to each generation's attributes, preferences, and motivators. Aldous has heard me say this 1,000 times. I believe our number one job as leaders is to set people up for success. Because if we set our people up for success, then we're fulfilling our responsibility to promote organizational goals. And by doing that, we have a greater chance, we're more likely to drive organizational success by recognizing, valuing, and leveraging those generational differences. All right, so one more poll, the last poll. Look at the list. Out of the 5, which strategy do you feel comfortable implementing tomorrow? Giving it a go, giving it a try.
Poll is open. See responses trickling in. Give you all another 10 seconds before it closes.
Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Yeah, that's really very impressive. And I think it's very reflective of reality. So cultural change, that's really taking the elements of generational diversity, right, and applying it at the macro level, at an organizational level. And obviously, work with your team on that. But generational diversity, you can start on your own. That can be, a professional goal, some professional development for yourself. And then adapting, really happy to see that. It just makes a huge difference. And I will say this, I had an epiphany. It took me a while to get there, but I learned that resisting doesn't work. Adapting works super well. And then adopting, like my relationships are so much stronger because I adopt. And people see it. They see that I have a lot of millennial. Collaboration within a team. That's great to see. Excellent. So I'm mindful of time, and I am going to turn this over to Aldous, but I just really want to thank you for being such a great group. Thank you so much. Oh no, here we go again with I can't move let me try. Okay. I can't move the slide because of the poll. Sorry. Thank you.
So thank you, Eileen, and thank you everyone for the questions throughout. I hope you found it insightful and taking from Eileen's experience and research. And we've just touched the surface on these, but hopefully it has made you more insightful, looking at a different perspective. Even yesterday's Wall Street Journal had an article on different generations and becoming CEO and the challenges for that happening. Beyond this topic, we do a lot of programs also online and in person. So here we've listed the 5 options coming up for this fall in value chain, critical thinking, AI strategy and governance, and then 2 for in the financial area. We also do a range of custom programs anywhere from a half a day to a full week on anything from managing multi-generational teams to finance to a mix of different business and management topics. And so on the next slide, here's my colleague Keith, who's been helping move everything forward today. Both Keith and myself, we work with companies across industries, across functional areas. If you have any questions about anything that we do or any of the programs, we invite you to reach out to us. Also, if there's a follow-up questions that you have for Eileen that we didn't get to today, feel free again to reach out to myself, Keith, or Eileen Wilson. Her contact information is certainly on the Michigan State website. We're at our hour, and so we'll be respectful of time. We thank everyone for joining today. I do hope you found this useful. If you have topics of interest for the future, we are looking at potentially supply chain AI and business process management improvements, but we're open to meeting you where you are and helping you make your organizations more effective. So do reach out to us. So again, thank you very much for joining today, and I wish everyone a blessed rest of the day and of the week. Look forward to seeing you again.